Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday to you. It is 10 o'clock. My name is Tim Harris, pastor of Woodburn Baptist Church. It's time for 10 with Tim. Each day, Monday through Friday, we take 10 minutes. I know. It's usually 11, 12. Last week, I think I hit 15 one day. I'm so sorry. I know your time is valuable. But give or take a minute, 10 minutes each day, going verse by verse through the Word of God. Today, we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 22. I love this chapter. I really do. I know you do too. This poem, but at this point in Ecclesiastes, we need it, right? I mean, already we caught on with the theme, man. Life is pointless. Life is meaningless. You can try pleasure, you can try wisdom, you can be smart, you can be stupid, but you're still going to be dead when it's over, And there's this incredible, I guess some people see it as pessimism. Some people could read Ecclesiastes and become completely depressed. It doesn't have that effect on me. And I think if you're reading it correctly, it won't have that effect on you. And part of the key to the meaning is found right here in chapter 3. This amazing poem here. It's this series of related opposites, right? Birth, death, planting, harvesting, killing, and healing, crying and laughing, grieving and dancing. This entire list of opposite actions. And what you have here is one of the most beautiful portions of all of Scripture. Now, what's the point, right? The preacher, Kohelet, the speaker in the book of Ecclesiastes has been telling us that life is meaningless. It's vanity. It's a vapor. It's like smoke. And there's no point to it. It's meaningless, without purpose. You're going to work your fingers to the bone and you're going to lay awake all night long. Everything you earn is going to go to somebody else. And when you got the point, right? But now, all of a sudden, there's this welcome moment where poetically he begins to say there is a season, there's a time for every purpose. It looks crazy, y'all, but there is some structure here. There's a purpose to all of this, and I think it's beautiful. Now, in some ways, I like to start there kind of at the bottom to understand the poem. I love what he says in verse 10. I've seen the burden that God has placed upon us all. I've seen the burden. I feel that, and I think you do too. I mean, in honesty, there is a burden to life. Just to keep going on. In some sense, to continue working when you don't love your job, and to continue hoping when you don't know what you're hoping for anymore, and to continue trying to make wise choices when it still looks like stupid people win. There's a burden to all of this, and sometimes it'll break your heart. But I love what he says. I've seen the burden that God has placed on us all, yet God has made everything so beautiful in its time. I just love that so much. There's a burden in life, but there's a beauty to it. And it's both. There's a burden in life that will absolutely break your heart, but at the same time, life is so beautiful, it'll break your heart. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's just this incredible sweetness to life. There's a burden and there's a beauty to it. Now listen to me. The key is to understand what God is doing. Now, as Kohelet says here, people can't see the whole scope of God's plan. You can't see from beginning to end. You don't know what God is doing. There is a time for every purpose. Whose purpose? God's purpose. It's not about what you're doing. These actions here aren't actions that you're going to take. These are God's actions. So if you want to find the beauty, there's a burden. Don't ever get me wrong. There's always this burden to it. But there's also beauty. And the beauty comes when you can discern what God is doing in this season of your life. You're never going to know the whole plan. You're never going to see from beginning to end, but you are going to be able to see this present moment. What's God doing right now? Do you understand what I'm saying? And so there is a time, there's a season. And the key to life, the secret to life, to understand the beauty of your life, you have to begin to understand what God is doing right now. That way you live your life in sync with God's purpose. You align your activity with what you know God is doing, with God's activity in your life. Am I making sense? In other words, There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest. In other words, you can't be trying to plant when in this moment of your life, God's trying to harvest. You can't be trying to build up in a season of your life when God is actually tearing down. Now, all of these activities are within the purposes and the plan of God. All of these activities, all of these purposes are within the character of God, within God's goodness, within God's plan to bless your life. You think if God's going to bless my life, there's going to be a time to cry? Absolutely. What, are you crazy? Of course. There are moments for tears because that's the point. Nothing in this life lasts forever. And there are beautiful moments and beautiful gifts, but they don't last forever. So that when they are gone, there's a moment for tears. There's a time for grief. Don't get me wrong, you're never going to live this life and escape all of the same griefs and tears and burdens that everybody else carries. But there is a kind of organization, there's a kind of purpose and plan to it all. And you can't see the whole thing. But altogether, it's just so beautiful if you can ever understand what God is doing. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, I just find this absolutely so beautiful. That last part there where he talks about, here's the human condition, that you're just like an animal. You're born out of the same dust, made out of the same dust as all the other creatures of the world. And they all die and go back to dust. And you're going to go back to dust too. I mean, man, thank you for that. But there's truth in that. This life doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts forever. And that's why it's beautiful. That's why it's important. Every year, at least once a year, we rent one of those bouncy castles here at church for Bible school or outdoors, whatever. We'll rent one of those, bouncy houses. And sometimes I get to work the bouncy house and, just to keep it going, you got to have a time limit, right? Like you can't let kids just jump forever because there are more kids that want to come in. So let's say it's going to be 5 minutes. So, everybody's taking off their shoes and they go in there and they got 5 minutes and for a while, they kind of bounce around. Inevitably, some kids will end up just sitting on the side, kind of sitting in the bouncy house. And, it's funny how they don't do much until I open the little curtain and say, hey, 1 more minute. 1 more minute. And when I say 1 more minute, they go crazy. 1 more minute, they're like, bouncing and bouncing and bouncing, they're bouncing, like they don't have forever to bounce, because all of a sudden when time runs out, you don't want to waste any of it. You don't want to miss any of it. And this is what I'm telling you. This is what Ecclesiastes is trying to tell you here, that there is a time and season for everything. And that just reminds you that, man, time runs out. Time runs out. I mentioned Edie last week. Edie, just one of the wisest things I've ever heard anybody say. Edie just talks about raising her daughter and how much she loved her daughter. And Edie would say that, used to love to sit with my daughter in my lap, and I can't remember exactly what Edie said. I don't know if Annie would play with her hair or touch her ear, but it was just the sweetest time between mother and daughter. And then Edie says, we did that, every day, for so long. But then there was one time when that was the last time she was ever going to sit in my lap and be like that. And you never know when that last time will be. One of my sweetest things is to climb in bed with my wife every night, and touch toes with her and just feel her near me. And man, that's sweet. But, we're not going to do that forever. There's going to be one night when either she or I are going to climb in that bed without the other one. We don't have forever, to be in bed with the love of your life. And this is what the preacher is saying here. This is where wisdom comes. You just have to understand that you don't have forever, that nothing lasts forever. And that's not to make you depressed. That's what gives every moment its value. That's what makes everything so sweet. It's like if I could open the curtain, into your life and just scream, hey, 1 more minute, and in that last minute, man, you would be soaking it in. You'd be tasting everything. You'd be seeing everything. You'd be laughing and dancing and, because you wouldn't want to miss any of it. So if you were thinking that life is completely meaningless, completely pointless, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 comes in and reminds you, no, there's a burden to it, but there's beauty in it. But the beauty comes when you realize that there's seasons to it. And none of the seasons last forever. So if you're dancing today, understand you may cry tomorrow. And if you're crying today, understand the time for dancing will come again. It's just, you have to keep yourself in sync with what God is doing. So the important question for you to ask is, what is God calling for me to do in this present moment? Is this a time for letting things go? Or is this a time for holding on to things? Is this a time for laughter? Is this a time for tears? Is this a time for building up? Or is this a time for paring down? You know what I'm saying? What's God doing? There's a time and purpose for everything, but it's not your purpose, it's God's purpose. And you can't see all of his purposes from beginning to end, but you can see what he's doing right now. And to understand what he's doing right now, if you can discern that, then you're going to begin to see some of the real beauty and meaning in your life. The meaning comes from what God is making of it. You know what I'm saying? Oh my gosh, I've cried and I've talked too long. The season for talking is over now. It's my day off, so it's a season for grocery shopping today, followed by the season of eating. That's my plan today. I love you guys so much, guys. I hope you understand how time runs out. Not just 10 minutes with Tim, but every minute goes so fast. So today, will you just live your life and love your life and enjoy it, because it doesn't last. It doesn't last forever. That's why I say, Lord willing, I will see you in the morning, 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim. We'll be in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 1 to 16. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 1 to 16.